Hello Webheads, and welcome back. Today we're going to talk about something a little different. We're going to be talking about something that, if it had happened, would have had significant implications for not only the Raimiverse itself, but also the Marvel Cinematic Universe. In fact, it would have connected these two universes together into one. A sort of proto-Marvel Cinematic Universe, if you will. But what do I mean by this? Well, we're going to cast our minds back to 2008. Ah yes, the good old days, and a very good year for superhero movies. 2008 saw the release of Iron Man and The Dark Knight, and it's Iron Man that we're going to focus on for the moment. Iron Man is a very interesting film. It's really a turning point in superhero cinema. It essentially kickstarted a multi-billion-dollar cinematic franchise by accident, and introduced the superhero shared universe idea to screen, for better or worse. But I think this film really has much more in common with the standalone superhero films of the 2000s that came directly before it than the, content we see Marvel produce today, almost 20 years later. And this is all well and good, but what's the connection between Iron Man and the Spider-Man trilogy? Well, Iron Man was going to have something quite considerable in common with the Spider-Man trilogy, and Spider-Man 2 in particular. Reportedly, in an early draft for Iron Man, it would have been revealed that Tony Stark would have actually been the inventor of Doc Ock's mechanical arms. Interesting. But let's delve a little deeper into this claim, shall we? Now, I've been seeing this fact crop up here and there over the internet for years now, and funnily enough, just after having decided to make a video delving into this claim, I saw it posted yet again on Instagram. So, since I'm making this little video about it, I decided to go into detective mode and dig a little deeper into its origins. Various pop culture sites have popularised this little factoid, including Screen Rant, What Culture, and comicbook.com, but they all seem to recycle the same generic wording, that being that this comes from an early draft of Iron Man. But I need more. I need a source. Concrete proof of this claim. I need a picture of Spider-Man with his hand in a cookie jar. And one article does include a link to its source, which is in the article found on comicbook.com, dated October 2021. This article links its source to another article found on moviephone.com from April 2018. And this particular article is the earliest I've found, which mentions that an early draft of Iron Man included Tony Stark being the creator of Doc Ock's arms. But does this article have a source? 14 facts regarding Iron Man. Yes, okay. Where's the Spider-Man one? That's all I care about. Ah, here it is. Right, I know all that. But what? No source? So, if this is indeed the article that initially lit the spotlight onto this fact, it's a so-called fact without any reference to a source. And when looking at all of these facts, the author hasn't referenced a source with any of them. So where did they find all of these facts from, I wonder? I suppose I'll just have to look for this draft myself. And now that I am, things do start adding up. Alfred Gough and Miles Miller, two of the writers of Spider-Man 2, wrote some early drafts for an Iron Man film. Well. Now, I'm no Sherlock Holmes, but I would deduce that if someone was going to write in a connection to Spider-Man 2 in an Iron Man film, it would very likely be the writers of Spider-Man 2. However, the only version of Gough and Miller's draft I can find online is a draft dated October 2004, which lines up, but it has revisions by David Hayter, and I'm not going to read through the entire script to look for one line that may have been omitted by this revision. I would definitely see Gough and Miller's drafts as a safe bet for the source of the claim, which leads me onto the last piece of this puzzle which more or less confirms this. When discussing his draft for Iron Man, Alfred Gough actually mentions that he worked with the researchers he did for Spider-Man 2 to come up with an Iron Man suit. The same researchers who came up with Doc Ock's tentacles. Interesting. Well, there you have it. The reason early drafts of Iron Man included Tony Stark being the actual inventor of Doc Ock's arms were because the early drafts were written by the people who wrote Spider-Man 2. Simple enough. What's rather interesting to me, however, is that this little link to Spider-Man 2 that Go and Miller included would have had a drastic impact on the overall world building and structure of the then fledgling Marvel Cinematic Universe. For starters, it would have meant that Iron Man would have been explicitly set in the Raimiverse, and that the MCU would have begun with the Spider-Man trilogy. Or would it? Let's take a quick detour to an alternate Marvel universe. Clearly, the peeps in charge of the newly created Marvel Studios, including Kevin Feige, were interested in connecting Iron Man up to previous standalone Marvel films, and not only to the Spider-Man trilogy. In an alternate post-credit scene for Iron Man, Nick Fury explicitly makes references to the Spider-Man trilogy, yes, but also to Bryan Singer's X-Men and the Hulk.
As if gamma accidents, radioactive bug bites, and assorted mutants weren't enough.
Of course, it would never have happened. I can't see that Sony would have allowed it at the time, even if this inclusion did make it to the final drafts. I wonder if Sam Raimi was even aware that this was in those early drafts. But let's imagine, if by some miracle they had allowed it, well, things would have been very, very different indeed. It does make you wonder what could have been, as in 2008, Spider-Man 4 was still very much in development. If this connection had been cemented, I can't see that Spider-Man 4 would have been cancelled, even with Sam Raimi's departure. They likely would have just got another director in. Who knows, Spider-Man himself could very well have gained his rightful place as the lead character of the Marvel Universe. And he may have even had an integral part in 2012's Avengers in this version of the timeline anyway. The possibilities could have been endless, and the MCU would certainly have looked far different. But we're heading into what if territory here, so let's go a little further. There is actually another Iron Man link to the Raimiverse, however this one is rather flaky. A few years ago, a Twitter user unearthed some concept art from deep within the files of the Spider-Man 3 video game. They discovered a piece of Iron Man concept art that many believe to be a possible Raimiverse Iron Man, and the design is, interesting. Oh, who am I kidding? This design is hideous. If Iron Man was going to appear in a Raimiverse Spider-Man project, I'd have wanted a better design than this. Another Twitter user proposed a possible explanation, however, stating that this concept art was actually intended for the Spider-Man Web of Shadows game. He goes on to state that the Spider-Man Web of Shadows prototype was built over the base Spider-Man 3 game, which is why the concept art was found within Spider-Man 3's files. It's a plausible theory, but still not confirmed. This piece of art still remains a mystery. Now, if I were to get my tinfoil conspiracy theory hat on for just a moment, what if this concept art was indeed intended for the Spider-Man 3 game? Maybe because developers and writers working on the game had heard of the possible connection to Spider-Man 2 that was potentially going to be included in the Iron Man film that was coming out the following year. After all, Toby did also record voice lines that reference other Marvel heroes, such as Captain America, that were ultimately removed from the game.
Captain America, get your heart out.
Did the developers know that the Spider-Man trilogy was possibly going to be the basis for a new shared Marvel universe of movies? I'll leave that idea for you all to ponder on. That all being said, I highly doubt it. I'll remove my tinfoil hat now before we delve into some truly unhinged territory. But regardless, it's a fun theory to consider. In truth, I suspect that the theory proposed on Twitter is the true reason this highly questionable piece of Iron Man art exists. And that brings us to the end of the video. I thank you all for watching, and hope you enjoyed my investigations into Iron Man's possible links to the Raimiverse that were ultimately never meant to be. If you did, give the video a like, and subscribe to the channel for more content focusing on everything and anything about the Spider-Man trilogy. But now it's time for you fellow webheads to let me know what you think. Would you have wanted this connection to have been established, or do you prefer the Raimiverse being a standalone world? I've always quite liked the Raimiverse being its own thing, but this is still a fun, possible alternate reality we could have got. Comment below and let's talk. And until next time, always remember, with great power comes great responsibility.